Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everybody. I'm really happy to get the opportunity to speak in front of this knowledgeable audience here, and also in this beautiful location. It's the third time I'm here now. The first time was the Europark conference a few years ago. Second time was with Francis and Emilie and Geneviève 4 years ago, I believe. So good to be back. So thank you to be able to present my ideas about mountain peatlands, about European mountain peatlands here. And nice thing is I never done such a presentation on mountain peatlands, so I really was able to spend some time thinking about what's particular about mountain peatlands. So these thoughts are very fresh, and they may not be the whole story, but that's maybe even better if it's not the whole story. So first thing I did, I looked at the world map. This is the newest available world map from the Global Peatlands Assessment. And one gets the impression, looking at this world map, that mountain peatlands are not, well, they may not exist. Of course, anybody who is familiar with maps has an idea about the issue of scale, right? So I think this is the most important thing that came to my mind when pondering the idea of mountain peatlands. Usually they occur on a smaller scale than lowland peatlands, because what we are seeing here is mostly a map of lowland peatlands, because on a global scale they tend to be visible. So of course peatlands are not missing in mountains. This is not a peatlands map, it's a soil organic carbon map, which of course has some resemblance to peatlands. It's from the joint study center in ISPRA, the people doing the soil maps for Europe. It's a map of organic carbon in soils, and so this is not Europe, of course. I'm sorry about that. I just need to make this clear, this point. We are missing parts of Europe here. But what we are seeing is, where do we get the peatlands? We get them still a lot in the lowlands, but we also have them in the mountains. So on this scale, this is very visible. So especially, of course, what jumps into our eyes is Scotland, the Pennines, then of course in Finland and the Baltics. But outside of these northern regions, basically we can see that there's a lot of soil carbon in the mountainous parts of Europe. Actually, I would say on average there is more soil carbon in the mountainous parts of Europe than in the non-mountainous parts. Of course, when you go to like the Netherlands or northwestern Germany or parts of Poland, there is a lot of carbon. So there is, of course, a lot of fens in Poland. Everybody knows that. But the Alps are very visible. The Jura mountains are visible. Massif Central, Pyrenees. So a lot of the mountainous places of Europe have a lot of soil carbon. And on this map here, when we are in the medium brown color, this is what qualifies as peatlands. So in fact, peatlands are quite present in mountains, and of course this is a matter of scale, because on this scale it's already visible to us. So I like to show this slide. I mean, you all know this. Peat will only accumulate when there is a lot of water. So we need a long period of wetness. So this is what we need to be looking for when we are worry about or think about where do peatlands evolve. So this is not from a textbook, so I just thought about this. What's different about mountain regions? At least in Europe, I would say, at least in Central Europe at least, mountainous regions tend to have been glaciated in the Pleistocene. And this Pleistocene heritage has been the basis for a lot of peatlands that we were seeing in Central Europe. So these Pleistocene heritage left behind the substrate and the landscape that was the basis for peatland evolution. So a clayey soil which seals the water from vanishing into maybe a karstic substrate like here in the Jura mountains. Permafrost cover at the end of the Pleistocene, which was also provided a good seal. Lakes that have been left in a moraine landscape, and these lakes also were the starting point for the formation of peatlands. And of course, the glaciers have been more common, and the permafrost has been more common in the Pleistocene period in the mountains than in the lowlands. So I think this is one thing that is particular, especially about Central European mountainous regions. Mountains tend to be more rainy than lowlands. If you look at a map or if, depictions of how much it rains in mountains and in lowlands, on average, especially the western slope or the northern slope of the mountains in Central Europe tends to be more rainy than the lowlands, since the winds are coming from the west usually. And if they're coming from the west, they tend to be humid. Of course, there are exceptions to that. When you go to intra-alpine valleys, for example, like the Rhone Valley or the Inn Valley, they tend to be especially dry, but only because the rain has penetrated the northern or western slope of the mountains. And they tend to be colder than the lowlands, as the air temperature declines with elevation and as evapotranspiration is very much controlled by temperature. So when we have a lower evapotranspiration, even more so in a rainy setting, the water tends to stay in the landscape. They're more varied. What do I mean by that? I mean that in mountain regions we have a large variety of topographic situations. So there is valley bottoms with flat terrain, there is slopes, steep slopes, not so steep slopes with a different inclination. The exposition is also important. Some of these slopes are facing northwest, so these tend to be the slopes that potentially get more rain, others face just the other direction. So we have a lot of variety of topographical settings that potentially facilitate the evolution of peatlands, and of course others of these topographic situations do just the opposite. They tend to be foggier, cloudier, and shadier than lowlands, as we are experiencing today. So in valleys, air movement is obstructed and there is more shade, just simply because some of these valleys do not see the sun a lot because of the angle of the solar radiation. So in summary, they're wetter. Wetter is not the same thing as rainier, because in mountains we have topographic situations where the water collects. So even if the hydrological water budget doesn't facilitate peatland evolution, there may be topographic situations where this is so in the mountains. And this is probably different from the lowlands, where if the water moves just anyway or slowly into different directions, this doesn't happen as easily. This is a recent map from Franziska and the co-authors about European mire regions. So here again we have the scaling issue. I marked some European mountain ranges, but not all of them. So I did not take great care to mark all the mountains. So I'm sorry if I missed your particular mountain range, but we see quite a few. And basically they were part of many microregions. Of course, when it says here that one Arctic seepage and polygon microregion, tundra seepage and polygon fens, these polygon fens, I would say, tend to be in lowland locations, in river deltas, but I would say that there is no mountain peatland type. We do have a few, I'll get back to that. But in general, I would say most mountain peatland types also may occur elsewhere. So there is no characteristic peatland, well, there are a few, but there is no like an array of a lot of peatland types that we only get in mountains. And the other way around, many peatland types that we get outside of mountains may also occur in mountains, because mountainous regions are quite varied, as we said. But, and this is like a but, of course they're particular, otherwise I wouldn't be here, otherwise we wouldn't worry about mountain peatlands in this colloquium and in the LIFE project. Compared to lowland peatlands, mountain peatlands are of course different. They're smaller on average. I mentioned the issue of scale. They are smaller. Why? Pretty often they are confined by mountain slopes. This is what we are seeing here, like in the Vallée du Dorp and in the valley bottom. This is all Tourbières, and on the mountain slopes, I would say it's probably not. So they tend to be smaller. This is a Rotmoos in Austria, confined on all sides with steep slopes. They tend to be better preserved. One of the first things that I learned when I started working on peatlands was that in Germany, 99% of our peatlands have been destroyed, in Austria 90%. So what's the difference? The difference is the mountains. It's not that no effort has been made to destroy the peatlands in the mountains, but it's only not as easy to succeed in the mountains to destroy a peatland, for the reasons I just mentioned, and also for the reasons of I would say that a kind of an industrial type of agriculture is not as likely to establish in high elevations. This is in the Lungau in the Salzburg state of Austria, a saddle mire, and we can see a couple of spruce trees lined up. This is a funny assemblage of spruce trees. So there has been a fence. So we are still seeing actually the spruce trees, and if you look closely, the former fence posts now have formed the basis for the formation of Sphagnum capillifolium hummocks. So that's quite nice. And but of course, this agriculture, this type of animal husbandry here with the pasture did not succeed in destroying the peatland at all, and at some point it was simply discontinued. So they are better preserved because they're remote, because no industrial agriculture tends to have happened there, and because it simply didn't pay to try to cultivate these regions. I said a few slides ago that in principle we find many peatland types in the mountains that we also find in the lowlands, but this is not 100% the case. This is a blanket bog in the Pennines, and of course we cannot find a blanket bog in the lowlands because you need moving, undulating, mountainous relief to get a blanket bog. Of course we don't find that in the lowlands as well. This is the Rotmoos mire in Tyrol in Austria, and on the valley bottom we are seeing a fen, which is really interesting in its how it's being built, because sometimes we have the peaty layers, then we have rock slides, then there's peat again, then there is rock slides again, and what's happening now actually from the melting glacier, this little river here is sort of destroying the peatland slowly because it gets stronger in its runoff characteristics and it's eroding the mire. But that's certainly one of these myotypes that we don't get in the lowlands. Since there is relief, mountainous peatlands are more prone to erosion. So we need to take care that we do not lose the peat due to erosion. This is a problem that we are facing in many settings in mountain peatlands, so much more than in lowlands, of course. They are subject to the specific types of damage. Yeah, so this is pasture. So we're seeing the hoofs of the cattle, and the cattle is getting bigger and heavier. So that's a problem. We're seeing this in many mountainous locations. Mountainous locations are predestined for animal husbandry, since many of these regions are too wet and too cold for cereal production, and so they tend to be used as grassland. And when the cattle gets bigger and heavier, the damage done by the cattle gets stronger. So this is a specific issue in mountains, and especially in Austria and the high elevation mires, we're seeing that this is actually the biggest problem. So this is looks somehow specific and very special, but in some regions this is the biggest threat to peatlands. This is another threat to peatlands in mountainous regions. This little pond that we are seeing has been erected to provide the water for artificial snowmaking. So artificial snowmaking, we have that everywhere now in the Alps and also in other mountainous areas for skiing. And in order to provide the water, these ponds are required. These ponds either are in locations where the water collects anyway, so then you don't need to build something around these ponds. That's convenient, but of course these are exactly the locations where mires tend to develop. So this is a specific mire-specific threat we are having here due to these ponds. If the water doesn't collect anyway, measures are being taken, like here. So a sort of a dam was being built to keep the water in this pond. And of course, what we are seeing here is there is a nice peatland just bordering this pond, and so this pond is now taking away some of the water. In effect, it has destroyed. This pond has destroyed a part of the peatland. So this is something that's a pretty specific kind of threat that we are encountering in mountainous peatlands. This is from the Jura Mountains, Bellelay. So I had the opportunity to go to Bellelay 2 years ago, and this is a small horse pasture, basically feeding or providing the water for the peatland in Bellelay. And this is, of course, not a really big issue in terms of beautification, but I'm showing it because it's not that big. I would say, compared to lowland settings, because of the rather extensive type of agriculture that we have in mountains, eutrophication, of course, is an issue, but it's not as much an issue as it is in lowlands. The lowland peatlands that I know in Central Europe are like in the middle of heavily fertilized agricultural industrial landscapes, where the nitrogen is ubiquitous and where it's almost impossible to keep an oligotrophic state alive. This is also an issue in mountains, but not as much as in lowlands. So I would say this is somewhat less of a threat than we have in mountains, in lowlands. I needed to say this, they're more beautiful. I have worked in lowlands for a long time, so I know lowland peatlands, I appreciate them, but sorry. Yeah, this is Pichelmeier, one of the sites we like to work in. Actually, this is restored. And the funny thing is, this was like restored without a plan. So peat has been excavated in this mire, and this was at a time when restoration was not a big issue, and I thought that they just closed the ditches for some reason. Yesterday on the train ride with Michael Steiner, I learned why they closed the ditches, because they needed to build a forestry road, and accidentally this forestry road sealed the water outflow from this site. And now in 25 or 30 years of it's not restoration, of doing nothing, 30 years of doing nothing, it has evolved in one of the most beautiful mires I know. So yeah. Yeah, so what are specific issues? This is actually some original, so far this has been a very general thoughts and nice pictures, which is, I think, is adequate for that kind of presentation, but I wanted to show also some research, recent research. So we published that last year. We need to acknowledge the hydrology in mountainous peatlands, which can be quite different. So since we do have these slopes in many mountainous locations, we do have probably very often this leaky slope type of mire, which means continuous flushing of water through the peat column, which is going to have consequences for the fluvial export of DOM, of resolved organic matter, and the peat will change. It's kind of a chromatographic process. This is what we do in the laboratory, right? We flush a mobile phase through a stationary phase, and by doing this, basically there is a sort of some kind of sorting of the substances making this up. In this case, the stationary phase also changes. And this is Ian Boothroyd, by the way, and Fred Verral in Moorhouse. So I like this picture because it shows the climate in this place. I've been there a couple of times, and every single day it was like that. So this is where we work, the mountain peatland up there in Pirkschachenmoor in Styria. And I compared this to a soup bowl, which means that there is a watertight clay layer at the bottom. We know from the eddy covariance tower that the water budget is in equilibrium, so we are evaporating or evapotranspiring as much as there is rainfall, and the DOM does not go anywhere. So all organic matter in this column, in the peat column, stays where it is. Also, there is no real pronounced change of carbon in this system. There is an instant preservation of peat. This is shown by this graph. So we did a couple of chemical analyses on the peat columns. So this is here the degree of unsaturation. There's other measures that we did. We could say like any chemical parameter will show this. Degree of unsaturation, oxidation ratio. You could do stoichiometric analysis. You could look for the specific compounds in the peat. And what we're seeing here is that the green column, that's Pirkschachenmoor, that's the soup bowl. So in the green column, there is really no pronounced change in the degree of unsaturation from the bottom to the top. That means the chemistry of the peat does not change a whole lot. There is an instantaneous preservation of the peat, as opposed to the Moorhouse setting, which is the pink curve, where basically the peat changes very much down to 50 centimeters depth, and this is because of this flushing. So we need to acknowledge the different hydrology, and we also, I think, need to adapt the goals. So what goal are we having? I think here in Vallée du Joux, and we are more like in this soup bowl situation, where there is no like big drainage, and I think we should be looking to keep the peat where it is. But as soon as we're on the slope, this may be different, and so this flushing may be just part of the system. Yeah. What else is specific about mountainous peatlands? I've seen this in a couple of locations in Switzerland, kind of these ditches being having been erected around mires for the sake of keeping bad water out. So I don't want to voice an opinion whether this is smart or not, but I would say it's an issue. Right, so the good water versus bad water, can we afford to keep water out of bogs because the water that we want to keep out may be polluted with nutrients. So this is an issue I have never encountered outside of mountain peatlands. I think there's probably a lot of discussion in the restoration community about this. What else is, since everything is on a smaller scale, that's my experience, 2 minutes. Farming is also on a smaller scale. Often it's family businesses managing the sites. And so we know this one farmer who is draining my favorite bog. I know him very well. I don't agree that it's a good idea, the draining that he does, but he does. Why? He erected a stable, 50 cattle to feed, and this was the spring of 2023. It was too wet, he couldn't feed his cattle, so either he would have to kill his cattle or he would have to erect this new ditch. And he did this in agreement with the nature conservation authorities. Same thing here. So talk to the farmers. When the scale is smaller, this is an opportunity because we tend to know these people personally. Keep the water where it is. That's a big challenge in mountainous peatlands because of the slope. This is from Torfstube in Upper Austria. And let's appreciate the small scale because it's beautiful. Appreciating the small scale means acknowledging that the topographic situations, the variety of these situations produces a lot of different hydrologic settings. So we simply need to look very closely. What kind of mire are we having? How does the water move? And what's our specific goal? Yeah, so conclusions, the last slide. Yeah, mountain peatlands are different. They are. Water management is the key. That's not big news, but it's, I think we cannot repeat this often enough. We need to find the right goals, appreciate the diversity and value the small scale. Thank you.
Donc, comme l'objectif, c'est de vous présenter rapidement un peu plus le détail des tourbières du massif du Jura pour savoir un peu où vous êtes pendant ces 3 jours. Donc, le massif du Jura, c'est une montagne qui est à cheval entre la Suisse et la France, qui fait en arc de cercle environ 380 km de long, 70 km de large et qui culmine à 1720 mètres au crest de la neige. Donc, on est sur de la moyenne montagne. C'est une montagne qui est conçue avec des roches sédimentaires déposées lors de l'ère secondaire, et notamment le Jurassique, qui tire son origine des géologues qui l'ont décrit dans le massif du Jura, qui est constitué d'une alternance de roches calcaires karstifiées, comme l'a dit Stephan tout à l'heure, et qui du coup laissent transiter l'eau à travers les fractures. Également en alternance, des couches de marne, donc des couches plus imperméables, plus argileuses, et la sédimentation s'est faite alternativement au cours des millions d'années avec des alternances marne-calcaire, sur une stratigraphie complète du massif qui occupe à plus de 2000 mètres d'épaisseur pour environ 200 millions d'années. La morphologie montagnarde du massif du Jura est issue du plissement lié à l'orogénèse alpine, à la création des Alpes. Et on voit un exemple un peu au nord d'ici, à la frontière entre la Suisse et la France, de cette montagne qui est un anticlinal, donc un pli qui a été érodé. L'importance vis-à-vis de ce que l'on recherche sur les tourbières, c'est que cette érosion en combe met en contact les couches marneuses, imperméables, avec la surface. Et dans ce contexte de combe, on a des couches imperméables qui arrivent à l'affleurement, mais sur souvent de petites surfaces. Contrairement à la situation que l'on a dans la vallée de l'Orbe, où là on est dans un grand synclinal, qui, du fait de sa morphologie, a capté et a conservé les couches imperméables plus ductiles que sont les marnes, plus des dépôts molastiques tertiaires qui ont été piégés dans ce vaste synclinal. Et ça, c'est une particularité du massif du Jura qui fait que l'on a des plissements qui sont de grande importance, contrairement aux photos que montrait Stephan, où on voit sur l'Autriche et du coup les montagnes alpines des reliefs beaucoup plus marqués. On a la chance d'avoir des grands espaces, plus de plateaux, avec parfois des grands espaces imperméabilisés en montagne karstique. L'élément suivant, c'est les périodes glaciaires. Donc ici, la dernière glaciation qui s'est exprimée, c'est celle du Wurm, et avec le maximum glaciaire il y a 25 000 ans. Et on voit sur le massif du Jura, donc tout le grand glacier alpin, l'emplacement du lac Léman et Genève et le lac de Neuchâtel. Et sur le massif jurassien, donc, on voit une grande calotte glaciaire qui culminait un peu à l'ouest de Bois d'Amont. Et on était, il y a 25 000 ans, ici, avec environ 500 mètres de glace au-dessus de notre tête. Le réchauffement et le retrait glaciaire, avec des photos de similarité qui viennent du Groenland, c'est des environnements extrêmement minéraux, pas de végétation, et des moraines glaciaires ont colmaté l'essentiel des dépressions et ont rendu imperméable le fond des glaciers, des secteurs, et ont généré un grand nombre de petits lacs. Ensuite, le tardiglaciaire, c'est le réchauffement, l'arrivée progressive de sols, des écosystèmes, de végétation qui ont stabilisé les pentes, stabilisé l'érosion, jusqu'à arriver récemment, il y a 9000 ans, aux premières tourbières du massif.
Donc c'est dans ce contexte qu'a décrit Pierre que les tourbières du Jura ont pu se développer. Alors je ne vais pas ici présenter une typologie hydrogénétique des tourbières du Jura parce qu'on n'a pas le temps d'une part et surtout d'autre part elle est à faire. Du coup je vais juste vous présenter les 3 grands cas de conditions dans lesquelles les tourbières du Jura se sont particulièrement développées. Le premier cas, ce sont les dépressions avec des pièces d'eau, des dépressions lacustres, comme on voit ici par exemple au lac Serein, au lac des Rousses ou au lac du Trouillot. Aujourd'hui, il y a encore des vestiges de ces lacs. Il reste encore une 50aine de lacs dans l'ensemble du Jura et l'immense majorité est bordée par des dépôts tourbeux. Mais il y en a un grand nombre qui sont colmatés, qui ont totalement disparu, plusieurs dizaines, possiblement plusieurs centaines. On les détecte assez facilement lorsqu'on fait des sondages. On trouve des dépôts de créels lacustres, notamment sous le dépôt de Tourbe. La deuxième grande condition, ce sont des dépressions, cette fois-ci sans pièces d'eau, sans lac, qui sont en fait sur des dépressions assez larges, assez plates. Ces conditions-là sont beaucoup développées dans le nord du massif, surtout sur des zones d'affleurement de marne. Comme on peut le voir ici, notamment à droite, c'est à Villeneuve-d'Amont, on a une altitude du substrat qui est relativement plate ou avec des légères dépressions qui étaient très favorables au développement de tourbes. Et enfin, le troisième cas, ce sont des cas d'émergence de nappes, soit sur des surfaces relativement plates, comme au champ Guidevaux à Banan, sur la gauche, ou bien sur pente assez prononcée, comme c'est le cas à Tréviers à droite, des petits systèmes comme ça qui sont alimentés souvent avec des liens avec les dépôts glaciaires. Alors ces différentes conditions sont souvent mêlées dans les sites jurassiens. On n'a pas toujours des conditions uniques de genèse. On trouve souvent des différentes conditions génétiques qui se retrouvent en un même site. Une des particularités des tourbières du massif du Jura, c'est de n'être jamais loin du karst, et parfois très très près, comme en témoigne par exemple cet exemple-là, qui n'est pas du tout isolé. Il y a un grand nombre de sites qui sont dans des conditions comme ça, où on a le dépôt tourbeux aussi, qui est entouré de pertes karstiques, Sur ce site de la Grande Seigne, à Passe-en-Fontaine, on a répertorié à peu près une trentaine de pertes qui sont immédiatement au contact des dépôts tourbeux. Donc si on dresse une carte des tourbières du Jura, la voici, un peu plus de 600 sites qui représentent à peu près 6400 hectares, beaucoup de sites, mais comme le disait Stéphane, de petite taille comparés à ceux d'Europe du Nord. Si j'ajoute l'extension du maximum glaciaire de la dernière glaciation, on a une idée de un petit peu de la corrélation avec ces dépôts-là, même si ce n'est pas exclusif, vous le voyez bien. Si j'ajoute l'altitude et enfin les précipitations supérieures à 1500 mm par an, vous voyez qu'on a un portrait des conditions qui régissent la venue et la tenue des tourbières dans le massif. Un climat qui est montagnard avec des importantes précipitations. Ici, on est à peu près 1800-2000 mm dans la vallée. Un climat qui a une tendance continentale avec des forts contrastes de température été-hiver, mais surtout un climat qui est océanique. Le diagramme des précipitations dérousse ici dans la vallée. Vous voyez qu'il y a des précipitations continues et ça a joué un rôle important dans la création, le maintien des tourbières et aussi leur extension dans cette partie du sud-ouest de l'Europe. Je balaie très rapidement les deux grands types de types fonctionnels tourbières, les tourbières minérotrophes bien entendu, qui sont dans le Jura essentiellement alcalines, neutro-alcalines à alcalines, donc des pH s'étendant de 8,5 jusqu'à 6, 5,5. Et sur ces tourbières alcalines se sont développées des hauts marais, des tourbières ombrotrophes, soit localement au sein des systèmes minérotrophes, comme ici au lac des Rouges-Truites à gauche, ou bien sur la totalité du bas marais d'origine, de la tourbière minérotrophe d'origine, comme ici à Villeneuve-d'Amont, où l'intégralité du marais d'origine a été envahie, colonisée par le haut marais avec des accumulations importantes. Là, on a 5 mètres d'accumulation sur ce site-là avec des versants assez abrupts. Hein. Donc un haut marais typique du Jura. Rapide aperçu, je vais passer rapidement dessus. On va dire, une gamme importante de milieux liés au marais. On va essayer de gagner du temps parce qu'on est un petit peu en retard. Et simplement, si on vient à la carte de répartition des tourbières dans le massif du Jura, et si on ajoute celle des hauts marais spécifiquement, vous voyez qu'il y a à peu près la moitié des tourbières du Jura qui ont vu se développer des tourbières bombées, des bogs, donc dans le système. Et ça, c'est pas anodin, c'est quand même une particularité du Jura de se trouver aussi, comme le signalait tout à l'heure Stéphane, on est vraiment à l'extrême sud-est de l'extension. Si on fait l'abstraction du massif central, on a vraiment le dernier bastion, on va dire, des typical rest bogs en Europe. Un très rapide aperçu de la faune, la flore qui sont présentes dans nos tourbières. Là, je me limite simplement aux espèces de la directive Habitat. On a donc 9 espèces qui sont présentes sur le site. On vous présentera tout ça plus en détail, évidemment, lors des visites de jeudi. Vous aurez encore une meilleure compréhension, on l'espère, des tourbières jurassiennes. Je vais m'arrêter là. Simplement, ce dont je n'ai pas parlé, c'est de ça, parce qu'il s'est passé ça depuis. Voilà. Donc, des atteintes assez importantes sur nos tourbières. Mais ça, c'est Pierre qui vous en parlera ce soir, la présentation des actions qu'on a réalisées dans le cadre des 2 LIFE. Donc, présentation conjointe par Pierre et Emilie en toute fin de journée. Merci de votre attention.